Ukraine has three options in this war. One is the immediate end of the conflict, and Ukraine recognizes Crimea, Donbass, Kherson and Zaporozhye as eventual Russian territory. Federalism is granted to Russian-speaking regions in Ukraine. This is the best option for Ukraine. Two is Ukraine keeps on fighting. We end up with a Sinai Peninsula situation. This involves changing facts on the ground, with Ukraine finally agreeing to a Bosnian federal model. 3. Ukraine continues to fight this American proxy war and loses the south and east of Ukraine, with the territories either being annexed by Russia. This doesn't even include Poland and Ukrainian neighbors taking a piece also. Let us not forget most of the oil, gas, coal, farmland and minerals are in the south and east of Ukraine. The longer this war of attrition goes on, the more Ukraine will lose in men, resources and territory. This Ukraine proxy war is a complete farce. The Americans have said for decades Ukraine and Georgia will be part of NATO. In this whole time Ukraine wasn't made a member of NATO, but de facto. Ukraine has had to make massive military contributions despite the internal economic situation. Yet they don't have the guarantee of American defense. Why does Ukraine need American defense? The Americans knowingly created hostile conditions. Before this conflict began on the 22nd February, Russia made a list of proposals and they outright said Ukraine being part of NATO is existential for them. Why did they not outright say with legally binding guarantees that Ukraine wouldn't be a part of NATO? This is because of the Western ego and refusal to be pragmatic. The sacrifice of Ukraine is cynical. Similar dynamics happened in Georgia. Considering this happened to Georgia, why risk peace in Ukraine for a militarized border with Russia and Ukraine being badly damaged in a war with Russia? Who suffers the most when a conflict rages on the northern European plain? It is Ukraine. What factors internally allowed this to happen? The U.S. role in impoverishing Ukraine since the 90s. The interference in the 90s, 2004, 2007 and 2014. The method is referred to as a color revolution. Color revolutions require internal unrest for them to exploit it. The Americans were involved with the chicken and the egg scenario. The Americans, like Yugoslavia, have pitted Ukrainians against each other. They supported the corrupt oligarchs since the 90s. They imposed reforms to deindustrialize and impoverish since the 90s. They empowered neo-fascists since the 90s. They dangled EU association agreement and membership knowing it would pick at these divisions in Ukraine. They created the conditions and incited all of this chaos. The association agreement was a poisoned chalice, just like the reforms since the 90s. Ukraine may not have a future. What has the West done for Ukraine? Caused untold chaos within and between Slavic brothers. They care not for Slavic lives. Croatian, Serbian, Polish, Belarusian, Ukrainian and Russian, they don't care. NATO wasn't designed to protect, it was meant to destroy Russia and the rest of Europe. They wanted to keep America in Europe, Germany down and Russia out. How do they achieve that? Divide and conquer with chaos undivided. What is the larger objective? To control the pivot area, which is Russia. To undermine sovereign countries like Iran. To pit India against its neighbors. To encircle Russia with a ring of steel. To weaken Russia, to encircle China. To dominate the Eurasian landmass. To control the whole world.